What do you think about the Laker team now?
Do you follow the box scores of the games every day?
Just the Lakers.
You're kidding. That is really a compliment. I was pleased to see you smile at the top of our show because once the game starts, you have a game face. You don't smile much out there.
I don't think you have to do things for money anymore.
Correct.
What's up, Laker fans? Welcome to the Laker Film Room podcast. I'm Pete, joined by Darius. And Team USA wins gold on both the men's and women's side. LeBron wins MVP of the whole tournament. Incredible. In the final game, the top four DPOY finishers played in the final game for all the marbles. It was Wemby, Gobert, who won it, Bam, and Anthony Davis. And in for all the marbles type of game, Anthony Davis was easily the most impactful defender, finished with 10 boards and 4 blocks and not a ton of minutes, including just a massive stop on Evan Fournier down the stretch. And then Steph Curry makes everyone go night-night with just 4 straight incredible bombs, one more audacious than the last one. And so an incredibly fun tournament, an incredibly fun Olympics. D, this is my favorite Olympics in a minute. Talk to me about just a great 2024 Paris Olympics.
Yeah, the gold medal game really built on the semifinal game, which was a great game in and of itself, right? And these games were great for different reasons. The Serbia game was a massive comeback in that fourth quarter where the best players in the world showed why they could be and how they could be the best players in the world in very specific ways. The gold medal game was, to me, a culmination of the time that this group put together to learn each other in very specific ways, but also an examination of like what makes each individual player great and how they can be at their best. I thought LeBron's playmaking in the final against France was unreal, and some of the passes that he made were just sublime in a way that you don't commonly see in even an exhibition game. And so for this to be at like the highest level game, behind the back passes, the pass to Booker was
on that cut.
That's like a soccer read where it's like you were crossing up your own defender and putting him in a position and then going at an angle to compromise the other defender's position that's on the backside. And then here comes the cut. And here's the type of pass specifically. Just unreal feel from LeBron. And then Steph putting on the type of shooting clinic and performative shooting that is really a trademark of only him. There's really no other player in the league and in the history of the game. And we've watched a lot of basketball, man. I'll put this question to you. Like, how many shot makers have you seen that could hit that series of shots? Like, I've seen Magic Johnson hit crazy buzzer-beating shots. The shot against Boston where he's like leaning off of one foot and banks it in. Some of the game-tying stuff, like Kobe obviously had.
Yeah, Kobe's the guy that...
Like a ridiculous number of game winners and acrobatic shots. But the sequencing of, and the panic that we talked about the last pod, that like defenders feel when he starts to get a little bit of space. That style of shooting is something that really only he can do. It's like going to a great concert and the band keeps like, oh, this hit, and then the next hit, and then the next hit, and it's building. There's really no other shooter in the history of the game that really does it exactly like that.
No, certainly not. And one of the things that I enjoyed was the interplay between him and LeBron, right? We had talked earlier like, hey, this isn't exactly kind of what we had pictured in terms of LeBron and AD possibly getting some reps prior to the Lakers season in these Olympics, running the style of 5 out that we hope they would. But from watching it more, that was one of the things that stood out to me is I saw a tweet from DParks24, a member of Lakers Twitter, where I'm paraphrasing here, but the essence of his point I thought was super interesting and illustrated in these Olympics. And his point was Lakers have spent all this time trying to find another ball handler to alleviate those duties from LeBron. But really, they should be looking for a scorer that LeBron can set up to play make for more, right? And I thought that was a really interesting idea in which watching LeBron just sort of be like, all right, you get the ball coming off of this curl, you get the ball over here. And he wasn't standing in the post, but he was standing at the top of the key on a lot of those possessions and trying to hit Steph coming off of a curl, Booker coming off of the other side. And I think, different personnel on the Lakers, of course, but I do think that there is some of that that's there in terms of what LeBron can do for this team going forward.
Well, LeBron is such a Voltron of so many other great players' styles and games, right? Like, oh, you need me to be the sort of super athletic, high flying, finishing forward, a la Dr. J. Okay, I'll be that guy. You want me to be the crunch time killer, ball dominant wing in the Kobe or Jordan mold? Like, he could be that guy. And then if you want him to be the pure feel point guard, big size, handling, orchestrating every single possession, a la Magic Johnson, he could be that guy too. And Team USA tapped into the latter a fair amount. They gave LeBron the job of starting point guard. There were other guards that were on the roster, but they were not built in that traditional I'm a point guard mold. And it was LeBron who was saying, give me all of this talent around me and I will orchestrate everything. And throughout the course of the game, though, it's like he could shapeshift. It was, I'm a post player, I'm a point guard, I'm a lane filling big who's going to finish with force at the basket. And I think that's why he was the MVP of the tournament, because over the course of Team USA's entire run, he was able to wear those different hats, and sometimes from possession to possession and from game to game to game. But Team USA's run was not just about LeBron and Steph or even Kevin Durant. It was all of these players, Pete. And like we mentioned this before, right? Like, I thought Devin Booker was
excellent. He was really good. Yep.
Really locking in to what his role would be in group play, but then specifically in the Serbia game and the France game. I just thought he played an excellent brand of controlled basketball, where it's just like he's so overqualified to play this specific role.
To be the defensive fourth option on offense, but he did it very well and consistently.
Yeah. Swing, 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 and it's Devin Booker there. And then he's facing a closeout, and it's like, oh, all I've got to do is shoot this open jumper and get to the basket or make the extra pass. He's such a good NBA player, a great NBA player. Someone who was looking like the best player on a team that went to the finals just a few seasons ago, right? And an all-NBA level player. For him to calibrate his game to fit into a very specific role while understanding these are the things I can do excellently and find the synergy between what the ask is and what his skill set is. I just think there's not a lot of players who do that with the level of comfort that he was able to. Like, he was at the opposite end of the spectrum of Jason Tatum, for example. And looking back just a few weeks, I wasn't sure if Booker was going to be able to do it. He looked similar to Embiid to me in terms of the shakiness, where it's just like, oh, is he like over dribbling? Is he holding the ball a little bit too much? Is he looking for his own a little bit too much? But by the end of the tournament, I was just like, oh, well, that was stupid for me to think that. Look how good Devin Booker is at this.
Yeah, and that's part of it, right? Like, a team deserves a chance to play together for a little bit, get a couple of weeks, a few games under their belt to figure some things out. That's part of the fun of coaching a team and putting a team together, is that you kind of have all these ideas in the off season and in the building of it. And then when the rubber hits the road, you see some things that it's like, oh, like 75, 80% of the plan worked, but we've got to make some tweaks here or there. And that's part of the reason why they have those build-up games on the way there. And I thought Booker, for a lot of these guys, they're experiencing a pretty big role change relative to what they do for their regular team. And so just being able to get those reps in, I thought was super helpful. And so him able to really adjust to that role speaks highly of him and his ability to fit into different teams that can win. Let's take a break here, and I want to come back, talk more about LeBron and AD. So let's start with Anthony Davis, D. He wasn't as big of a factor in the Serbia game, but he came in and in that fourth quarter shift, it's funny, at the beginning of it, he had a couple of turnovers and he was just a little casual with the ball where I was like, you got to wake up, man. And then he really dominated down the stretch of that game. And the Lakers have two closing lineup guys, which is a great place to start. But it's interesting in that they are not the prototypical number one and number two. KD and Booker, right, are a good example of this, of they can impact the game in different ways. And we were just talking about Booker's ability to defend and sort of fit into a 3-and-D type of role. But neither guy can really dominate a game on that end of the floor. And with AD, he can dominate a game without having to shoot the ball, which I think is one of the most valuable skills that there is, because there are so many guys where they actually need touches, they need shot attempts to be able to do that. And then on the other hand, we have LeBron as well, it was more of a pick your spots, like I'm going to be opportunistic in transition. In the half court, I'm going to be way more of a passer. He didn't look to score a ton himself in the half court. And so the Lakers have these two guys that at the highest level of basketball in competitions, they are on the floor to close the game, but they are not necessarily the guy that are looking to score as your like number one type of option. And so building a team around that is super interesting.
It definitely is. I want to zero in really quickly on AD's specific skill set before we zoom out about how it impacts the Lakers, right? Just because we gave LeBron his flowers, we gave Steph his flowers, we gave Booker his flowers, and KD deserves, I think, a ton of credit as well here. But Anthony Davis, when he's allowed to be this all-court defensive maven, and then someone who offensively has the freedom to basically go to the glass and be an impactful player by screening and rolling, but basically just being around the basket. He is so damn good. And one of the things I don't think AD gets enough credit on is his understanding of how to impact winning. We often think about that from the context of when you have the ball. The way we were talking about LeBron, for example, and his shape-shifting and his understanding of what play needs to be made and then orchestrating the chess pieces around the board in order to accomplish that. AD is a player who understood, I think, the entire tournament, but especially against France down the stretch, that I can impact this game by rolling to the basket hard and then occupying defenders on the backboards. And when it's time to go get the ball, just go get it, because these guys don't have anyone to deal with me. And defensively, the way that he was mirroring the ball handler and contesting jumpers, got a couple blocks on jump shots, made a couple of guys double clutch and pass out of a jumper when they had already elevated. His ability to contest and alter shots around the basket, block shots around the basket. He was instrumental to what Team USA was doing. I was interested to see, Pete, if it was going to be Bam or AD that got that closing spot, but Kerr went to AD, and it was not to say that AD was head and shoulders above Bam. I thought Bam was great.
He was
this
great,
entire run.
I thought he was an option there too, yeah.
But AD has just a little bit more size, a little bit more length. Bam has some sturdiness to him, but AD's ranginess is just as good as Bam's, I think. And he's just an incredible, instinctual player. And I just don't think we talk about him in that way often enough, where we're just appreciative of how good that he can be. And the fact that he was a closing lineup guy and clearly someone that they wanted to close with. I thought the Serbia game was more about rhythm, him being in foul trouble, and how good Embiid was offensively, more so than any detriment to what AD could or could not do.
I mean, I think even Superman has his kryptonite, right? And over again, we see that when AD goes up against a big bruiser, he's not as good against those guys as he is against other teams. But he gives you the ability to play a too big lineup to where it's like, just put another, and even he can guard that guy as long as there's back rim help. It can't be a guy that can't defend the rim at all. It's just like the solution to that, we've seen it over and over again, is just play him in a too big lineup. We won a championship like this, beating a Denver team that has Jokic, which Serbia does, where we played two big lineups for that series and that series alone almost the whole time. And so in the defensive player of the year type of discussions, one of the knocks on AD, which I get, is motor, right? So like that's one edge that I think Bam has over him is over the course of 82, will possession to possession run the floor more, just have a little more of elevated motor. But when it comes to the highest levels of basketball, and like the only guy who can challenge his ceiling defensively is Wembanyama, right? And I would argue Wemby has an even higher ceiling than AD, that he'll get there defensively eventually, but he's not able to move his feet to quite the same way that a guy like AD can, where AD can really dance with you when he is locked in like that. And he's a lot bigger than Bam. And so he can wreck shop on the offensive boards, be that big man against smaller guys in the paint, or can go out onto the perimeter in ways that just not a lot of bigs can. And so in the context of the DPOY conversation, there were 15 players that scored 25 a game. I'm rounding up from 24.7 in AD's case, right? So he was the 15th leading scorer in the NBA last year. I'm going to go through this list and think about who else on this list has a decent amount of defensive responsibility. To me, when you go through this, there's 1 to 3, depending on how you want to look at it. Luka, Giannis, Shea, Jalen Brunson, KD, Booker, Tatum, Fox, Steph, Jokic, Maxey, Anthony Edwards, LeBron, Kyrie, AD. The vast majority of those type of guys have very little defensive responsibility at all. And so I know that there is no like DPOY for guys who average 20 points a game, right? There's no like caveat like that. But I do think it's worth pointing out in the context of this is that he can get you 25 a game without a ton of plays being run for him on those putbacks, on cuts, on rolls. Obviously, that's going to be depressed in an Olympic environment with shorter games and more talent and all of that. But he can dominate on both ends of the floor and get you 25 while not having a lot of plays run for him, and has the highest ceiling defensively of any of the guys involved. So yeah, is he gonna maybe not run back on defense on some plays during the regular season that other guys will, or maybe there'll be some possession like, come on, AD, you got more in you than that. There's a famous clip of LeBron yelling at him like, get back on defense, care about the game, right? But when it comes to the highest levels, you know, like there's nobody I'd rather have defensively.
He's so good. He's just so good. And I'm not saying, oh, well, I don't know if they win the gold medal without AD. I don't think anyone's saying that. Like, he's part of a collection of talent that LeBron called the Avengers for a reason. The level of talent that was on this roster is pretty unreal. And the fact that players as good as Jason Tatum or Tyrese Halliburton don't really play at all. And it's kind of like, whoa. Like, how good are these other dudes, right?
But then that says, for a guy like AD, where you're like, hey, we need that guy out here, even with all of that talent, it really speaks to his level of ability.
Yeah, which is where I was going with my point. It's not like I'm saying they couldn't have won without Anthony Davis. Like, I think Bam was great and everything else. But AD's ability to be all that you said that he was, and the coaches recognizing the fact that out of the 3 all-NBA level bigs that were on this team, including a guy who won an MVP in this league, that Anthony Davis was clearly the first choice to be the guy that in crunch time of a must-win game, he's the choice. Him and Booker were basically like that generation, and he's older than Book, but it's like LeBron, Steph, and KD, those dudes are late 30s. LeBron's about to be 40. Durant is 35, and Steph will be 37 this upcoming season. AD is 31, and Booker's 27? They're that mid-age veteran where it's like, okay, of all the guys, we think you're it. It wasn't Anthony Edwards that was in there. It wasn't Jason Tatum that was in there. Those dudes are clearly excellent players and all NBA first or second team level guys. But AD's making this case as like, look, you're one of the best players in the league, because in the time that we need to win the most important game, we think you're the dude that should be out there.
It's always nice when a Laker can take off the Laker jersey and put on Team USA so everybody else can see them and appreciate them for as they are. We saw this with Austin a little bit last year. Like, oh, that guy's really good. Getting that with Anthony Davis. I saw a decent amount of like, oh, AD should have been the defensive player of the tournament, went to Avramovic of Serbia. Not really here to debate that, but just like seeing a level of appreciation for like, wow, how good he is. And in such a unique way, it's been cool to see. Let's take another break. And I want to talk a little bit about that generation gap in Team USA basketball. So I was calling the game on playback. Join me for those this season coming up for Laker games. And by the end of it, I was a little misty, right? Like it was LeBron and Steph and KD. And I mean, maybe they come back in 4 years. They're so good that I don't want to like take it entirely off the table, but there's a very good chance that the last time we see all four of those guys in the Olympics. And this was Steph's first Olympics, right? There have been a number of circumstances that have gotten in the way, but that whole generation has held the torch for Team USA and just U.S. basketball for so long. And that I see all these lists where it's like LeBron gets ranked 12th or 11th, and like a couple guys who are on the team that did not look as good of basketball players always ranked ahead of him or AD. And so talk to me a little bit about just that group, that age. I don't know if it says something poor about that next upcoming generation that you were just talking about, but I think it says more about just how special that older group is.
Yeah, I think that those guys are once in a generation players. And we've seen several generations now. Like the first generation I saw when I came into the league was the Bird and Magic group. Right. And then 4 years later, it was Michael Jordan. And Bird, Magic, and Michael Jordan, those are the three guys where they were on the dream team. And it was Steph, KD, and LeBron that were recreating all of their pictures that they took for Dream Team. And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason why they're called generational talents. No shade towards Jason Tatum or Devin Booker or any of these other guys who are all NBA level talents like Joel Embiid, even, who I think is great. And if he was fully healthy all of the time, we'd probably be having a different conversation about him. But the truly iconic players, the guys who, when you think back on the league, who are known by one name or are the first players who pop into your head when you consider like who was great at this particular time or this particular position, there's only a few of those. And if you're a fan for 25 years, you might see 5 of them.
That's right. That's why I think back of, I put together a video on Jerry West and the work that he did in the 90s. It's up on my YouTube. And in going through it, the first season that I covered was the 91-92 season, right as Magic was retiring. And Portland beat us in that series. And I was watching in the clinching game of that series, Clyde Drexler put up like 42, 12, and 7. And if you were alive during the 90s and aware, like Clyde Drexler was the second best shooting guard in the league for a long old stretch and was just one of those guys that you look to around the league. That I would put him on a similar tier as a Booker or a Tatum, as a like, this guy's consistently amongst the best players in the league. But the way that time can fade legacy and memory, he's still a Hall of Famer, still a great player. But even though he was the second best guy, there's no comparison between. And now part of this is media and how the stories get told, of course. It's a big part of it, but it just shows the difference. Clyde Drexler was a first ballot, clear Hall of Famer, and yet the number of guys that you actually see that are on that Mount Rushmore, that sort of like, I've never seen a player quite like this before, are so few and far between.
Clyde Drexler made the 50-year anniversary team. He made the 75-year anniversary team. He won a championship. He went to multiple finals. He was clearly the second best shooting guard, just like you said, for basically a decade. And made, I'm sure, at least 2 or 3 all-NBA first teams, right? Where it's just like, after the Magic era, I would imagine that he made at least one. And if I'm wrong, I don't care. I saw that dude play. He was awesome. But I look at Drexler and I think of that difference between him and Michael Jordan is huge. And like that marketing, yes, it's marketing, but marketing exists within the context of what your brain tells you is special.
Yeah, it has to be awe-inspiring in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah, the media gravitates towards that for a reason. Watching that old guard play, the next guy up in that sort of discussion of who is the next great like face of the league idea is probably Wemby. Giannis is up there as like a great player. Luka is up there as a great player. And when their careers are over, we may be discussing them in the way that we're discussing LeBron and KD and Steph. Maybe. Wemby seems like that level of dude where it's just like, oh, you can be that guy. But how many of those guys, we've done our Basketball Gods series, right?
Sure.
How many of those guys have we actually seen? Like, I would argue it's Magic, it's Jabbar, it's
Jordan,
Larry, Jordan, Shaq, Kobe, LeBron, Steph, Durant.
Yeah, that might be the list, right? There might be one or two that we haven't thought of in that, but yeah, that's over the course of 40 years.
Yeah, and it's just like, there's other great players who tap that, right? Like, I would argue that like Duncan was right there too, or like Olajuwon, right? Those guys, their personality stuff may not have enabled them to reach the level from like a fame standpoint that we're discussing, particularly with Steph and LeBron.
Right.
Kobe was on that list too. But at any given time, there's 2 or 3 players who could arguably say like, I'm the best player in the world, or I'm the best player in the league. And when you get 2 or 3 of those guys to team up and they're at this stage of their career, and I think that that's what made it special.
Yeah.
These dudes are 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21 years like in the NBA. It's sort of unreal to think that when it came time to say who are our very best players, those 3 were going to be on the court to close the game. Like, I watched the women's game yesterday morning, which I thought was
great game.
A fantastic
that was like a 2 to 4 absolute slugfest, 2 to 4 point game almost the entire time.
But like, I was watching and sort of like, oh, she didn't play Diana Taurasi. Mm-hmm. So Taurasi's 42 now, right, and clearly the old lion of this team. And she seemed fine with being someone who never took off the warm-up gear. But that's basically LeBron's age. She's like a year and a half older than LeBron, basically. And to think that to me was a stark difference in terms of watching LeBron still be the guy for this team from a leadership position, from the everyone looks to me position, and someone who has the gravitas and demeanor to take that on, even with this group of guys that includes Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. It was just great to see that. And then to see both LeBron and KD defer to Steph Curry at the end of the gold medal game and say, we've seen this up close. And from Durant's side, from a teammate side, but both from a competitor side, we've seen this. We know what this looks like, and we're giving the ball to you. And as a guy who's lived in the Bay Area for a long time, to see Steph turn to the crowd after I think it was the 3rd 3 and say, you don't know about me, like just the way that he carries himself, I just thought it was classic Steph. Yeah. And everyone who is, I don't know, man, it's just one of those things where you're like, you see family and you're like, I know this. And now I see this dude go out there and do it. I just thought it was incredibly special. And for it to be the gold medal game, it was just something that made me warm inside. And so that feeling of like, oh, it's getting a little dusty in here, watching these old Lions still lead the pack. And not be the people who were cheering them on, and watching the young guys celebrate those veterans that are heroes to them. It was an incredibly special tournament, and I don't know if we'll ever get another one quite like this.
Absolutely. It was just a beautiful thing to see, one of those Olympics that we'll always call back to and remember, especially those last two games. But great run overall. Congrats to the women's team as well. Kalia Copper came up huge in that fourth quarter, got a ton of rebounds. I think she had like 8 points and was just gobbling up rebounds in the paint, and a great game on that end. Shout out to the French women who put up a great game. Gabby Williams just a foot on the line away from sending it to OT, hit a couple of big time shots, but great basketball in Paris. Been a lot of fun carrying us through. We got about 6 weeks left until training camp opens, somewhere around there. We will be back tomorrow, talk a bit of Lakers, but until then, you've been listening to the Laker Film Room Podcast. We'll catch you guys next time.
James has got it in low to McHale. McHale wants to turn. He's double teamed. Just pass out in front. Broken up by Worthy. Tip to Magic. Worthy dies on his belly. Magic scores.
There's Magic got it. Magic fires. It's good. They will. Lakers win the game. The Lakers win the game. Rebound of Lonnie. 3 seconds left. Van Exel to win it. It's on the way. Good.
Kobe Bryant, 48 points, 16 rebounds. Shot with his 8th block shot that ties an NBA Finals record.
A lot of Laker fans sticking around for this.
You're seeing something that's very rare indeed. A Laker to get MVP chance
in Boston. Of all places.
Are you kidding me?
Kobe, hard to believe.
Are you kidding me? Unreal. Are you kidding me?
Lakers looking to push. Bryant spinning in the lane. Back for Gasol. Pretty pass. And it's back to a 3-point game.
Kobe Bryant picked up by Bell.
There's the move. 2, 1.
Miss it. Unbelievable. For the victory. It's over.
Shot clock now to 5. Bryant. Yes. And that was a little tap to Alvin Gentry.
Add insult to injury, Kobe. I mean, what a shot. I mean, you can't defend that. Are you kidding me?
2.1 seconds remaining. Denver a foul to give. Jokic trying to disrupt Rondo. He puts it in. Here's Davis, 4-3 in the win. Oh, it's good! Anthony Davis has won it for the Lakers! James again. Oh, he hits another one. LeBron James putting together a closing quarter against the Nuggets.
This historic 2020 NBA championship belongs to the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers conquer the bubble, and banner number 17 will soon hang in the rafters.